Have you ever looked at yourself and wondered, in a world overflowing with pressure, performance, and silent prejudice, why do some women still carry light in their eyes, calm in their hearts, and strength in every step they take, while others feel lost, trapped in a life of endless people, pleasing, unsure of their worth, always chasing happiness just beyond reach? This contrast isn't explained by self-care routines, inspiring quotes, or weekend workshops. The answer lies much deeper, buried in the unconscious. Carl Jung called it the undiscovered self, the part of you that modern life taught you to forget, where women were handed masks to wear, but never the keys to who they truly are. Jung believed that a woman's path to becoming herself isn't rebellion, it's an awakening, a return, not by rejecting her gentleness or compassion, but by choosing to offer them consciously, not compulsively. So what is the secret behind a truly confident and radiant woman? In this video, we'll begin the journey to unlock that secret. And if you're a woman who's exhausted from performing, who aches to simply exist as your real, unfiltered self, this journey is for you. Because at the end of this path is a version of you the world has never seen, not because she never existed, but because she was never allowed to emerge. Until now, 1. The secret lies within, not outside. Modern culture trains women to seek validation from the outside. The perfect body, the perfect relationship, the flawless career, a life polished for applause. But here's the irony: the more women achieve this image of having it all, the more hollow they often feel. They smile, but it's weary. They succeed, but never find peace. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." From childhood, many women are taught to be agreeable, pleasing, and selfless. To smile when they want to cry, to say yes when every part of them whispers no, to make themselves small for the comfort of others. Over time, this performance becomes so habitual they lose their voice, and then believe they never had one to begin with. Jung called this artificial self the persona, a mask worn to be accepted, not a reflection of the soul. But when a woman wears the mask too long, she forgets there's a face beneath it. She no longer knows the difference between what she wants and what she's expected to want. Think of the high, achieving woman with a glowing resume and a perfect home, but who cries behind closed doors, confused by her own sadness. Or the mother who meets everyone's needs, except her own, and can't remember the last time she felt alive, or even seen. These aren't failures. They're signs you've lived too long for the outer world and neglected the one that breathes quietly within. And that inner world, it's not polished or peaceful. It's wild, vast, unmapped. It holds the pieces of yourself you've forgotten, denied, or buried. This is the realm of the shadow, not evil, but unloved. In your shadow lives your rage, your envy, your desires, the need to be free, the right to say no, the hunger to live unapologetically. As a child, you expressed this freely until someone told you it was wrong. So you silenced it, and with it, you dimmed your fire. But Jung didn't tell us to destroy the shadow. He told us to integrate it, because your wholeness lives in what you've been taught to hide. A woman unaware of her shadow will often ask herself, "Why do I feel empty despite having everything? Why do I repeat the same painful patterns in love? Why can't I say no without guilt?" These aren't flaws. They're unconscious loops running in the dark. Take, for example, a woman who feels jealous when a colleague outshines her. She tells herself to rise above, hides her envy, and then criticizes herself for not being evolved enough. But that jealousy is a message, a desire to grow, to be seen, to achieve more. Only by listening to it without shame can she transform it into fuel. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." So, if there's a question that keeps echoing inside you, why do I keep ending up here? Why do I feel invisible? Why do I give so much and still feel unloved? Write it down, not for the world, but for yourself. Sometimes, naming the question is the first step toward reclaiming your story, because this journey isn't about surface-level healing. It's not about perfect morning routines or quick fixes. It's about standing still and listening. It begins in those quiet moments, when you're alone, when the world stops demanding, and a small voice inside you says, "I'm tired, I'm scared, I want more than this." And for once, you don't silence her. This isn't a journey with a timeline. It won't always feel graceful. But every time you choose truth over performance, presence over perfection, you come home to yourself. The radiant woman you seek isn't someone else. She's you, beneath the layers, and now she's ready to rise, quiet enough to finally hear the voice of your own heart, the same voice that once rang clear in childhood, before it was silenced by expectations, punishment, and the ache of becoming what others wanted. And then, one day, without announcement or applause, something within you shifts. You begin to act differently, subtly, bravely, not for approval, not for applause, but for you. You say no, without explaining yourself. You walk in the opposite direction, even when everyone else tells you you're lost. You confront a fear that once brought you to your knees, and this time, you don't retreat. That's not rebellion. That's awakening. Happy women don't live perfect lives. They live true ones. They honor their essence, even when it means breaking the mold others worship. Because real confidence doesn't come from degrees, a flawless body, or a room full of admiring eyes. It comes from one profound realization: I am myself, no more, no less, and that is enough. This is the secret, not out there but in the most honest conversation you'll ever have with yourself. When a woman turns inward, she stops waiting for a savior. She becomes her own guide, and from that moment forward, the world no longer holds the power to define her. 2. Reconnecting with the feminine energy within. When a woman begins the inner work, confronting her shadow, her pain, her people, pleasing masks, something sacred begins to stir. She doesn't just release what no longer serves her. She begins to remember what was always hers, the sacred, wild, intuitive force that was buried long ago. And there, deep in the unconscious, she meets an ancient archetype, the goddess within. This is not the flawless figure glamorized in ads, not the polished, seductive image curated for male approval. The true goddess is wild, wise, instinctual, untamed. She is creativity. She is mystery. She is the life force Jung called an archetype, an eternal presence in the collective unconscious, woven through myth and memory across cultures and time. Within every woman lives this original essence, a radiant current of wisdom, magic, and connection to nature. But society has buried her voice, reduced women to roles, pleasing, serving, performing, and in doing so, muted the primal song of the feminine soul. Imagine the little girl you once were, climbing trees, shouting joyfully, scribbling wildly, asking forbidden questions. Until one day, the corrections came. Girls don't act like that. Is that how a lady speaks? No one will love you if you're so stubborn. And so, the goddess within her, your creativity, your fire, your independence was locked away. Not because she was wrong, but because the world wasn't ready for her. As women, we grow up chasing beauty, control, and perfection. But behind the sharp eyeliner and morning routine is a quiet ache. There's something I've forgotten. That whisper. It's her, the goddess you once silenced, calling you home. No woman is born disconnected from her feminine essence. It's encoded into her soul, like a lighthouse in the dark. It's the part of you that knows how to flow with life, not fight it. That says, slow down, you are safe now. But over time, this sacred energy is stifled by expectations, criticism, and the pressure to survive in a world that honors doing over being. And so, the feminine doesn't disappear. She withdraws. She hides behind armor forged from pain. Carl Jung called this disconnection a loss of the archetypal self, the soul's deepest layer, waiting in silence to be remembered. Feminine energy is not a look. It's not a gender, it's a spiritual state. Jung described it as the anima, the gentle, intuitive, emotional current that lives within. But when the inner child is wounded, this energy is the first to be sacrificed. A girl told she's too sensitive, too emotional, too much learns to trade her softness for safety, her intuition for logic, her tears for control, and yes, she becomes strong, but she also becomes fractured, cut off from the source of her creativity, sensuality, and inner peace. The feminine is not weakness, it is the soft power of receiving, the courage to feel, the beauty of simply being. It is the river that flows, not the wall that resists. It is the whisper that says, "You don't have to earn your worth, you already are enough." But most women have been taught to silence this voice long before they even knew what it meant to be whole. You may have been taught that emotions are messy, that softness is weakness, that your desires make you too much. Perhaps you grew up in a world that celebrated logic and achievement, but looked down on intuition, sensitivity, and dreams that couldn't be measured. And so, the inner child within you, the one who once danced without shame, dreamed without limits, and cried without apology, learned to shrink. She traded joy for performance, and wore strength like armor, never realizing it was slowly burying her truth. Carl Jung believed that the archetype of the inner child is the root of our freedom, our emotional vitality, and our creativity. So if you find it hard to relax, if pleasure feels guilty, if softness feels unsafe, you are not broken, you are blocked. You've been surviving in a world that demanded you abandon yourself, but now it's time to return, to heal the child within, to let her guide you back to the woman you were always meant to become. Picture a small stream winding through a quiet valley. At first, it moves effortlessly, cool, fluid, instinctual, flowing around rocks, beneath trees, becoming itself in motion. Then one day, it meets a massive boulder. It doesn't know why the boulder is there, only that it must adapt. So it changes course, slips through cracks, finds narrow gaps. It begins to believe that flowing freely will only lead to obstacles. It learns to constrict in order to survive. This stream is your feminine energy. It is meant to flow, sometimes gentle, sometimes fierce, but always true to its natural rhythm. Yet, for many women, this energy becomes distorted by too many rules, too many old beliefs that whisper, "I am only worthy when I make others happy." And like the blocked stream, your essence stops reaching the light. To restore that natural flow, a woman must first feel safe in her body, in her heart, and in her emotions. But an inner child who was never loved unconditionally cannot open easily. She becomes the woman who doesn't trust love, who controls rather than receives, who explains everything away because vulnerability once brought pain. She builds walls for safety, not realizing those same walls have become a prison sealing away her deepest, most feminine essence. Feminine energy cannot be awakened through force. It awakens through surrender, through presence, through trust in the unseen flow of life. But how can a woman let go when her entire body is braced for betrayal? How can she soften when she's spent her whole life being told softness is dangerous? This is how she drifts from her essence, not because she lacks it, but because she was taught it's unsafe to live by it. Think of the last time you held back your tears to avoid judgment, or stayed silent when your heart wanted to speak, because you feared rejection. That was a moment your feminine energy was silenced again. The tragedy? You thought it was maturity, you thought it was wisdom, but it was an old survival reflex, one your inner child learned in a world that didn't know how to love her. Carl Jung never saw the restoration of femininity as a moral act, but a spiritual one. It is a return to the soul through compassion, shadow work, and radical self-acceptance. It is the courageous act of sitting beside the parts of you that were labeled too emotional, too weak, too much, and saying, I see you, you belong, you are part of me. As a woman reconnects with the goddess within, she unlocks a buried life force, intuition. You can't measure it, but you know it, that gut feeling, that inner voice, the quiet sense that something isn't right. The whisper, I don't belong here, try a different path. Yet over time, women are taught to mistrust this voice, to call it impulsive, irrational, foolish, to seek advice from others before listening to themselves. But Jung believed that intuition is the sacred language of the unconscious, the bridge between the personal soul and the greater self. A woman cut off from her intuition is like a ship without a compass. She may seem steady, but inside she is drifting, and when she begins to awaken, the primal flow within the first feeling is not relief but upheaval. She is no longer who she once was, but not yet who she is becoming. This is the threshold of transformation, the beginning of what Jung called individuation. Number 3, the process of individuation. Carl Jung did not believe the goal of life was to become the best version of yourself. That's a modern ideal, a polished illusion. He wasn't interested in perfection. He was interested in wholeness. The true journey is not about becoming better, but about becoming yourself, all of yourself. Individuation is not adding more. It's removing what doesn't belong, the borrowed beliefs, the survival roles, the false identity, the survival roles, the false identities you picked up to feel safe, to feel loved. It's meeting your shadow, the parts you've rejected, and welcoming them back into the light. It's making room for the feminine essence, for the inner child, for the buried memories that shaped you more than you realized. Individuation is not some glowing, graceful ascent. It is a descent into your roots. It is gritty, emotional, humbling. It means facing the past, making peace with what hurt you, owning both the brilliance and the brokenness inside. It is only when you integrate all of these parts, the rational and the intuitive, the strong and the soft, the dark and the luminous, that you step out of the fragmented life of performance and into a life that is deeply real. One woman who began this journey said, "For 30 years I wore a mask. I smiled when I wanted to scream. I said yes when I meant no. I was always what others needed, and never who I truly was. But when I returned to the little girl within me, to the wild, soft, emotional parts I once felt ashamed of, I realized I had never actually lived a single day. And from that moment on, I couldn't go back. The process of individuation is not easy. You will feel lost. You will grieve the version of you that was never real. You will stand at the edge of the unknown, no longer belonging to the old world, but not yet at home in the new. But this is the sacred journey of becoming, the descent into yourself, the return to wholeness." Jung believed we can never truly evolve until we confront the psychological inheritance we carry, the pain, patterns, and silence of generations past. And in doing so, we become not just free, but fully alive. The voices in your head, they aren't always yours. They sound like your mother, your grandmother, society, religion, the rules etched into you before you knew what they meant. And somewhere along the way, you confused them for your truth. But a woman walking the path of individuation, she begins to untangle herself from those inherited echoes, not to reject her roots, but to discern what voice is truly mine and what voice is the ghost of someone else's fear. This is the quiet revolution, and here lies the greatest challenge: resistance. Because when you change, you silently ask others to look at themselves, and not everyone is ready for that. When a woman begins to say no instead of yes, when she reclaims her time, her space, her energy, she is not cold. She is not rebellious. She is awake. She is no longer playing the role others handed her. But to those who benefited from her silence, this change feels threatening. Why are you so distant lately? You used to be so sweet. What they mean is, I can no longer control you, and that unsettles me. One woman shared her story. Since childhood, I was the glue, the peacemaker, the emotional caretaker. I held everyone together, my mother, my siblings. I carried it all, without question. But eventually I collapsed under the weight, and I stopped. I stopped calling every day, stopped absorbing emotions that weren't mine, stopped rescuing everyone else, and they called me cold, selfish, ungrateful. But for the first time in my life, I felt free. Jung called this a confrontation with the self, not to conquer, but to understand, not to become an ideal, but to become whole. This process isn't cosmetic, it's cellular. It restructures everything, your values, your relationships, your rhythm, the way you walk through the world. Each day becomes intentional. Each choice is a brick in the foundation of a self, not shaped by the world, but forged from within. You may be somewhere on this journey right now. Maybe you've made decisions no one understood. Maybe you've stood between two worlds, unsure where you belong. If you feel called, share your story in the comments. Even one honest sentence might remind another woman, you are not alone, because this journey is not easy. That's why so few choose it. Individuation demands solitude. It asks you to release familiar roles, to walk into a room full of people and stay true to yourself even if no one applauds. But in that solitude, you begin to hear your own voice again, and that voice, that is your anchor. Jung once wrote, loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that matter most to you. Individuation teaches you to speak those sacred truths, even if only to yourself. As a woman moves deeper into herself, she begins to see the world through new eyes. What once seemed immovable jobs, marriages, reputations may fall away, and she is not afraid. Not because she doesn't need love, belonging, or safety, but because she no longer allows those things to define her. She builds a new value system, one where loyalty to herself outweighs loyalty to a role. She chooses relationships not out of fear of being alone, but from the peace of knowing she'll never abandon herself again. This is not the wild recklessness of rebellion. It is a sacred freedom, like standing in a vast desert without fear, because you finally know who you are. From that moment forward, you become unshakable. Not because life doesn't hurt, but because you no longer flee from your pain. You hold it, you learn from it, and then you rise. Individuation marks the end of an era. The era of living through borrowed truths, of pleasing to survive, of shaping yourself into a woman the world would find acceptable. But it is also the beginning of something breathtaking, your true life. Not a replica of your mother's path, not a checklist of perfection, a life written by you, chapter by chapter, choice by conscious choice. Number 4. The true source of strength. As a woman walks deeper into this sacred journey, she uncovers a truth no one told her. Real strength does not come from being perfect. It comes from being whole. And wholeness is not something you wear. It's something you become by embracing every single part of yourself. Too many women have been sold a false ideal, the perfect woman, composed, beautiful, effortlessly successful. Never angry, always gracious, but that is a trap dressed as aspiration. The more you strive to be her, the further you drift from yourself. And one day, you awaken to the reality. Perfection was a prison. And you were the one holding the key. Wholeness is different. It does not ask you to be shiny or strong every day. It asks you to be present with what is real: exhaustion, grief, longing, rage, desire. Jung called this integration, the process of bringing every fragment of your being into one cohesive whole. It's the opposite of denial. It's not fixing yourself. It's making peace with your full emotional landscape. Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, Jung said, but by integration of the contraries. The more you deny your envy, your anger, your fear, the more those emotions control you in secret. But when you bring them into the light, when you say, "This is part of me too," they soften, they teach, they integrate. That is real strength, the courage to meet your shadow without shame. Wholeness also means reclaiming your body. Not as an object, not as a project, but as a sacred home. Women are taught their bodies must meet expectations, be slim, but not too sexy, be attractive, but not intimidating, be desirable, but never deviant. In chasing the right body, you lose connection to the body that is yours. You exercise to punish, diet to conform, wear makeup to feel worthy. But what if you asked, if my body were my best friend?